Someone cancels plans on you. Most people read the message, feel a small flicker of annoyance, and move on with their afternoon. But you don't move on. Something quieter and more persistent begins. A low hum of questions your rational mind knows are probably unnecessary, but your nervous system runs through anyway. Did I do something? Is this the beginning of a distance I haven't noticed yet? Should I reach out, or would that be too much? Hours later, you're still there, not because you chose to be, because your brain simply wasn't finished. If you've ever sat with something long after everyone else let it go, if you've been told you're too sensitive, too intense, too much, this video is not going to tell you to toughen up. It's going to explain exactly what is happening inside your brain and why the people who called you too much were looking at the wrong thing. There are 7 signs, and they are not personality flaws. They are documented patterns of a specific neurological trait, one that roughly 20% of the human population carries in one form or another. But here's what most people don't know about that 20%. Their brains look different on a scan. Sign 1. You don't just hear music, you become part of it. There's a particular kind of person who has to be careful about what they listen to before an important conversation. Not because music distracts them, because it changes them. A certain chord progression in the wrong moment, and something shifts in the chest before the mind has any say. This is not nostalgia. This is not sentimentality. In 2014, a team of neuroscientists led by Dr. Bianca Acevedo and Dr. Elaine Aron used functional MRI to scan the brains of individuals scoring high on what researchers call sensory processing sensitivity. The study was small, 18 participants, scanned twice roughly a year apart, but the replication across both sessions gave the findings additional weight. When exposed to emotional imagery, higher SPS individuals showed significantly greater activation in the insula, a region deep in the brain now understood to be central to integrating bodily sensation, emotion, and self-awareness. They also showed greater activation in brain regions associated with the mirror neuron system, particularly the inferior frontal gyrus, as well as areas linked to awareness and empathy. In other words, the same emotional experience processed at a measurably different depth. Some people hear music, others become part of it. This is why you tear up at the wrong moments. It's why a particular song can undo you completely, not because something is wrong with you, because something in your brain refuses to keep experience at a comfortable distance. Sign 2. You are always reading the room, even when no one asked you to. Here is a question worth sitting with. Have you ever walked into a situation and immediately known something was off? Not from what anyone said, but from something in the air. A quality of silence. A half-second's hesitation in someone's expression. Something invisible that you noticed and everyone else seemed to miss. Research published in Social Cognitive and Affective Neuroscience found that when given visual tasks requiring detection of subtle differences, people high in sensory processing sensitivity consistently outperformed others specifically on tasks requiring deeper perceptual analysis, not on tasks where differences were obvious. Their brains were doing something extra with the same input. Dr. Elaine Aron, who has studied this trait for over 30 years, described it with an analogy that has stayed with researchers ever since. Most people, she said, sort incoming experience into 2 or 3 categories. Highly sensitive people sort the same experience into 10. Same room, same conversation, same situation, a completely different depth of information received. And here is the part that doesn't get said enough. This is exhausting in a way that is almost impossible to explain to someone who processes differently. Because you didn't choose to notice everything. You just do. Sign 3. The border between your emotions and other people's emotions is thinner than most people realize. Empathy for most people is something they choose. They recognize someone's pain, and they decide to respond to it. But there is a different relationship with empathy, one where the choice happens too fast to be a choice at all. You walk into a room where 2 people are barely holding a tension between them. Nothing said, nothing visible, and within minutes that tension is living inside you, not beside you, inside you. The 2014 Acevedo and Aron neuroimaging study found that individuals higher in sensory processing sensitivity showed greater activation in brain regions associated with the mirror neuron system, areas involved in how we intuitively sense and internally represent the states of other people. These regions appear to process others' emotions not merely as observations, but as something closer to shared experience. In highly sensitive people, that shared quality seems to run deeper. empathy becomes exhausting when your brain forgets where you end and someone else begins. This is not weakness. It reflects a measurable difference in how strongly the brain responds to others' emotional states. And it explains something you have probably felt without ever having the words for: the strange fatigue of caring too much, too automatically, for too many people at once. Sign 4. You need silence the way most people need sleep. This sign surprises people, because from the outside, you often seem perfectly social, engaged, present. What they don't see is the cost. Think of it this way. 2 people attend the same dinner party, same conversations, same room, same 2 hours. One of them drove home, made a cup of tea, and was fine by 9. You drove home and needed an hour of silence before you could speak to anyone. Not because the evening was difficult, because your nervous system processed every undercurrent, every subtext, every slight shift in energy at that table, and all of that processing has a price. Sensory processing sensitivity research is consistent here. The trait involves deeper processing of environmental stimuli, more neural activity deployed, more integration happening. That requires more resources, and resource use requires recovery. Recovery time is not fragility. It is the cost of the depth. Sign 5. You carry guilt that was never yours to carry. This is the sign that researchers find most interesting, because it appears at first glance to be the most irrational. Someone in the room is upset. They are not upset at you. They may not even be thinking about you, but something activates anyway. A quiet, automatic sense of responsibility for an emotional weather you did not create. This connects directly to the depth of processing and the strength of the brain's response to others' emotional states. When your nervous system is this attuned to the people around you, it has difficulty fully distinguishing between "I am observing this person's distress" and "I am responsible for this person's distress." The signal is so strong that the distinction blurs. The guilt is not irrational. It is the correct response to the wrong conclusion. Your nervous system handed you a problem to solve. It just failed to mention the problem belongs to someone else. Sign 6. There are moments when beauty feels almost unbearable. Not many people talk about this one. The specific quality of light at a certain hour. An old photograph. A piece of music you've heard before that somehow today undoes something in you. A sentence in a book that makes you stop and stare at the ceiling for a moment before you can go on. These are not dramatic experiences. They are private ones, and they are more common for some people than for others. Research into sensory processing sensitivity has consistently found that individuals with this trait report stronger emotional responses to art, music, and natural environments. The same neural depth that makes overstimulation difficult is also what allows certain kinds of beauty to arrive with unusual weight. It is the same dial, turned all the way up in both directions. You don't get the depth without the sensitivity. You don't get the sensitivity without the depth. They are the same thing. Sign 7. You have always known. Not in a dramatic way, not as a statement. Just a quiet, persistent sense, carried since childhood, never quite named, that you move through experience differently than most people seem to, that something hits you and keeps going, that endings cost you more than they should, that you notice things that no one else comments on, feel things that no one else seems to feel, and have learned, over many years, to keep most of that carefully to yourself, because the alternative was being told, again, that you were too much. Here is what the research actually says. Sensory processing sensitivity is found in roughly 20% of humans. It has also been documented across more than 100 other animal species. It has been associated with variants in serotonin and dopamine transporter genes, though researchers are clear that this is a complex polygenic trait. No single gene explains it, and genetic factors interact with environment in ways scientists are still mapping. It shows up in brain scans. It has been observed across diverse human populations. It is considered stable across a lifetime. It is not a disorder. It is not a trauma response. It is not anxiety in a different coat. It is a trait, a specific, heritable, neurologically measurable way of processing the world. One that evolutionary biologists believe persists because it is adaptive, being the individual in a group who notices more, processes more deeply, and pauses before acting has survival value, not for the individual alone, for the group. You were not built for a world that moves this fast and feels this shallow. Most environments were not designed for the level of depth you naturally operate at. But here is the distinction that matters. The world being wrong for you is not the same as you being wrong. You have spent years wondering why things land on you differently, why you carry what others set down, why you need more time, more quiet, more space to return to yourself after the world has moved through you. Now you know. You're not broken. You're not too much. You're not behind. You're someone whose nervous system refuses to participate in the comfortable numbness that most people call being fine. And there is a cost to that. There is also something that most people, living quietly at a lower volume, never quite arriving at the full depth of a moment, will simply never get to feel. Depth isn't louder. It's just harder to walk away from, and you never learned how.